corrupt judge and cops set up a black woman. They regret it when she reveals she's a CIA agent in court. They arrested her under flickering streetlights on a cold, moonless night, smirking as they slapped the cuffs on her wrists. It was supposed to be an open and shut case, a minor traffic violation that spiraled into drug charges and a swift conviction. The crooked cops had done this before. They knew exactly which judge's courtroom would seal her fate. What they didn't know was that Zara Mae Collins wasn't just any defendant. Beneath her calm exterior lay the training of a highly skilled CIA agent, and the darkest corners of the justice system were about to be exposed. This is the story they never saw coming. Zara Mae Collins was no stranger to overcoming adversity. Born in Detroit's East Side, she was raised by a single mother who juggled 2 jobs to keep food on the table. From a young age, Zara learned to navigate life's challenges with grace and grit. She was the girl who rose at dawn to deliver newspapers before school and stayed up past midnight to study by the dull glow of a street lamp outside her bedroom window. Even as a child, it was clear that Zara possessed an uncanny ability to remain calm under pressure. By the time Zara turned 18, she had already developed the habit of reading 3 newspapers a day and analyzing every piece of local and international news she could find. Her small bedroom was lined with maps and highlighted government documents that she collected from libraries. She wanted to understand how power worked, who wielded it, how it was acquired, and why it was so often abused. Little did she know that this lifelong interest in justice and governance would one day land her in one of the most secretive government agencies in the world. After high school, Zara enrolled at the University of Michigan to study political science and international relations. She graduated top of her class, overshadowing even the most privileged students. Her performance caught the attention of recruiters from the Central Intelligence Agency, who were always on the lookout for disciplined, determined, and quick-witted individuals. Zara fit that profile perfectly. Joining the CIA was no walk in the park. Zara endured grueling training, physical conditioning, weapons handling, psychological evaluations, and advanced interrogation techniques. Her personal background gave her a keen sense of street smarts, while her academic achievements offered her a well-rounded global perspective. Over the years, she undertook several covert operations overseas, handled high-risk assets, and gathered intelligence that shaped national security decisions. But her profession was a secret. Officially, Zara worked as a consultant for the State Department. She traveled under diplomatic cover, visited hotspots around the globe, and returned stateside with barely a whisper about her real work. As a black woman in a predominantly male field, she knew the importance of quiet resilience and strategic thinking. She carried these qualities like armor, wearing an unassuming smile that concealed her formidable skill set. In her early 30s, Zara took a step back from active field work to focus on domestic security issues, a role that often kept her in Washington, D.C., but also granted her more personal freedom. The everyday tasks that most people found mundane, driving to the grocery store, going to the bank, felt almost luxurious to Zara, who had spent so much time under aliases and constant surveillance in foreign lands. One autumn day, she decided to take a short road trip to visit a friend in Fairfax, Virginia. She had heard about a cozy bed and breakfast just on the outskirts of the city and planned to spend a few quiet days there, catching up on reading and relaxation. Little did she know her trip would bring her face to face with one of the most corrupt corners of local law enforcement she'd ever encountered. The trouble started when Zara noticed flashing blue lights in her rearview mirror. She was driving just a few miles per hour over the limit, an honest mistake she planned to rectify the moment she saw the cop. However, the officer who approached her window wore an unsettling grin. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a shaved head and a menacing air about him. "License and registration," he barked. Zara calmly handed over her credentials, thinking this would be a routine traffic stop. The officer disappeared behind her SUV to run her plates, taking longer than usual. Finally, he returned, but something in his eyes had changed, like he had discovered a secret or found an opportunity. "Step out of the vehicle," he ordered curtly. Zara frowned. "Is there a problem, officer?" Now he snapped. The hostility in his voice was palpable. Zara complied, stepping onto the gravel shoulder of the road. The officer motioned for her to put her hands on the hood of the car. Confused but compliant, she did as told, her heart pounding not out of fear for herself, but out of concern over what the officer believed he had on her. The officer patted her down. It felt excessive, invasive. She tried to remain calm, but a sense of dread began to coil in her stomach. Then, out of nowhere, another squad car pulled up. Two more officers stepped out, both wearing similar expressions of barely concealed malice. Before Zara could protest, one of the newly arrived officers claimed they found a small bag of white powder under the passenger seat. Zara's eyes widened in shock. She'd never seen that bag before. She was meticulous about keeping her car clean, and she definitely never had any drugs in her possession. She opened her mouth to speak, to protest, but the officers moved quickly. They slapped cuffs on her wrists, reading her Miranda rights in a cold, dispassionate tone. In a matter of minutes, Zara found herself in the back of a police cruiser, adrenaline pulsing through her veins. She kept her mouth shut, mentally sorting through her options. She was well aware that small-town police could be brutal, especially when they believed no one was watching. Moreover, Zara didn't want to blow her cover as a CIA agent by raising a fuss too early. She needed time to assess the situation. As they drove to the station, the officers stayed quiet. Every once in a while, the officer riding shotgun glanced back at Zara with a smug grin, as though already celebrating his success in bringing down yet another easy target. Zara couldn't help but recall statistics she'd read about systemic racism in the justice system, especially in certain counties with questionable law enforcement records. This might be one of those places, she thought grimly. "Look at this," said the driver to his partner in a low voice, raising Zara's driver's license. "Zara May Collins from D.C. Bet she thinks she's real important. Let's see how important she is when the judge sees these charges." His partner snickered. "Yeah, well, Judge Kendall always knows how to handle them." Zara mentally filed away the name Judge Kendall. She had no idea who he was, but something told her he wasn't a fair, impartial man. In her line of work, Zara had encountered warlords and despots. She knew how power could corrupt. Even so, the realization that her own country's justice system harbored such corruption was sobering. When they arrived at the station, she was processed, fingerprints taken, mugshots snapped, personal belongings confiscated. She was then led down a corridor lined with stained walls and flickering fluorescent lights to a cramped holding cell. The smell of sweat and disinfectant made her nostrils flare. The single bench was hard and cold. Zara sat down with a calm she'd learned to perfect in CIA training, but inside her mind raced with questions. Who had orchestrated this? Why? Was she just an unlucky victim of a corrupt system, or was someone specifically targeting her? Over the next few hours, she was left alone. Occasionally, an officer would walk by, sneering or making a derogatory remark about her so-called drug habit. Zara said nothing, stoically enduring the humiliation. Eventually, a female officer came by to escort Zara to an interrogation room. The woman seemed indifferent, but not overtly hostile. Still, Zara couldn't trust anyone here. Inside the stark interrogation room, Zara faced two male officers, including the one who had pulled her over. He introduced himself as Officer Cole, while his partner was Officer Moreno. Cole leaned over the metal table, his knuckles resting on its surface. "Tell us where you got the drugs," he demanded. Zara shook her head. "I don't know what you're talking about. Those drugs aren't mine." Cole smirked. "Of course. None of you people ever own up to it." A flash of anger shot through Zara, but she suppressed it. CIA training taught her that anger was a tool best used strategically, not unleashed carelessly. She just stared at Cole, refusing to show weakness. Moreno took his turn, flipping open a file. "Your record is squeaky clean, Zara Collins," Moreno said, sounding almost impressed. "No priors, no parking tickets, nothing. Yet we found a bag of cocaine in your car. Care to explain that discrepancy?" Zara's nostrils flared again, but her voice remained even. "It was planted." Officer Cole laughed, glancing at Moreno with mocking amusement. "That's a new one. So you're claiming we planted it? Or some random stranger planted it?" Zara folded her arms. "I'm claiming I'm innocent. Tell that to the judge," Cole said. "He's known to be tough on drug offenders. You're looking at a felony possession charge. That's a nice chunk of prison time if convicted." Without giving her another chance to speak, they ended the interrogation and escorted her back to the holding cell. Zara's mind raced. She needed a plan. Yes, she had her CIA credentials, but using them prematurely might compromise her current role and compromise any chance of building a case against these corrupt officers. It was crucial to handle this carefully. Zara needed to see how deep this corruption went and who exactly was pulling the strings. A short while later, a tired-looking public defender entered the cell block, calling for Zara May Collins. The lawyer, whose name tag read Sofia Vargas, approached Zara, rummaging through a stack of documents. She was disheveled, as though she had far too many cases to handle. Ms. Collins, I'll be representing you at the arraignment, Sofia said briskly. We need to go over the details. Zara glanced at the guard, who seemed preoccupied with his phone, then lowered her voice. I'm not guilty. The cops planted those drugs. Sofia sighed, as if she'd heard this story 1,000 times before. Do you have any proof? Zara shook her head. Not yet. Sofia rubbed her temples. Then it's your word against the police. Around here, that's not going to cut it, especially in front of Judge Kendall. He's particularly strict with drug offenses. He's known to give the maximum sentence. Zara narrowed her eyes. She needed time to strategize. Let's just get to the arraignment, she said. I want to see the judge and understand the lay of the land. Sofia nodded, though she seemed skeptical that anything could save Zara from the swift machinery of local justice. Zara, however, had no intention of letting some corrupt officers and a biased judge ruin her life. She had taken down cartels and terrorists. She wasn't about to be beaten by small-town power players. One question, though, loomed large in her mind. Would revealing her CIA status cause more harm than good? At this point, she had to tread carefully, because once that cat was out of the bag, there would be no going back. The morning sun filtered through the smudged windows of the courthouse lobby, illuminating specks of dust as Zara stood in handcuffs beside Sofia Vargas. The corridor was crowded with other defendants, lawyers hurrying in and out of courtrooms, and uniformed officers stationed at every turn. Zara's mind churned with possibilities, escape plans, alternative strategies, secret methods to contact her handler at Langley without raising suspicion. But she forced herself to remain calm. Patience was often the key to unraveling corruption. Sofia led Zara into the courtroom. The place had an imposing aura, with dark wood paneling, high ceilings, and rows of benches filled with spectators and family members. At the front sat Judge Horace Kendall, a stern figure in his late 50s with thinning gray hair and a perpetual scowl. He wore his robe like it was a monarch's cloak, giving curt nods to the attorneys who approached the bench. As Zara was led to the defense table, she discreetly assessed the judge's body language, shoulders rigid, jaw tight, a man accustomed to holding power. When he called Zara's case, the bailiff announced the charge, felony possession of a controlled substance. Zara felt the weight of the words as they echoed through the courtroom. State your plea, Judge Kendall said in a gruff voice. Sofia spoke for Zara, entering a plea of not guilty. The prosecutor, a wiry man with glasses named Arthur Nash, outlined the charges, portraying Zara as a dangerous criminal who tried to smuggle narcotics. Something in the way the prosecutor spoke, his feigned outrage, struck Zara as performative. He made sure to emphasize Zara's full name, her race, and the fact that she was from out of town. It painted her as an outsider, an intruder on their pristine community. Judge Kendall peered down from his bench. You'll be held without bail pending trial, Ms. Collins. Given the severity of the charges and the possibility of flight risk, this court finds it necessary to keep you detained. Sofia tried to object, pointing out Zara's clean record and stable background, but Kendall waved her off, hammering the gavel with a resounding crack that echoed through the room. Zara stood motionless, her face expressionless, as the bailiff escorted her back out. Inside, though, her anger simmered. No bail. This was highly unusual for a first-time offense with no prior record. The fix was in. In the holding area, Zara finally had a moment to speak with Sofia again. She leaned in, keeping her voice low. Have you ever seen anything like this before? Sofia nodded grimly. All the time, unfortunately. The judge, the prosecutor, the local cops, they have a tight network. Once they set their sights on someone, it's tough to break free. Why do they do it? Zara asked. Sofia pursed her lips. Partly money, partly power. Some people claim Judge Kendall has stakes in private prisons. More convictions mean more profits. The prosecutor uses high conviction rates to climb the political ladder. And as for the cops, well, some of them might be on the judge's payroll, or they just enjoy exerting power over people they consider lesser. Zara swallowed. She'd witnessed corruption in foreign nations, but seeing it here in the so-called land of the free was infuriating. I need to make a call, Zara stated. Sophia studied Zara with concern. The cops here rarely allow calls that aren't monitored. Be careful what you say. If you have friends in high places, maybe that's your ace in the hole. But it'll also make you a target. Zara gave a faint smile. I can handle myself. Sophia raised an eyebrow, but said nothing more. She promised to keep working on Zara's defense and left for her next case. Zara was led back to a detention facility that partnered with the local county jail, an ironically modern, well-equipped place rumored to be linked to the private prison system the judge was allegedly profiting from. The facility's interior was clean but oppressive. The fluorescent lights never fully dimmed, leaving inmates in a state of perpetual half-day, half-night. The correctional officers patrolled with a sense of smug authority. Zara quickly observed that many of the inmates were people of color, mostly jailed on drug-related charges. It confirmed her suspicion that this was a well-oiled machine designed to churn out convictions. After a few days, Zara finally got her monitored phone call. She dialed a number from memory, reaching one of her CIA contacts. She kept her words vague, referencing only that she was caught up in a legal matter in this specific county. She emphasized the need for documentation to prove her identity, but also insisted that her contact not blow the operation wide open just yet. She wanted to see how far the corruption extended. The conversation was brief, but enough to put certain wheels in motion. In the meantime, Zara tried to keep a low profile within the detention center. However, news spreads fast among inmates, and soon enough, she became a point of interest, an out-of-towner with an aura of quiet confidence. Some of the other women approached her, seeking advice or simply curious about why she wasn't visibly scared. A few correctional officers even took note of her composure and seemed unsettled by it. Hey, Ms. Collins. One officer sneered as he passed by her cell. Heard you think you're better than the rest of us. We'll see about that when Kendall puts you away. Zara ignored the taunt. She spent her days reading whatever book she could find in the jail's small library, focusing on law and personal accounts of wrongful convictions. She wanted to arm herself with knowledge she would weaponize once she stepped into the courtroom again. One afternoon, she was called out of her cell for a surprise visitor. Expecting Sophia or perhaps a CIA contact, Zara was instead greeted by the smirking face of Officer Cole, the one who had initially pulled her over. He stood in the visiting area, arms crossed over his chest. Your lawyer's busy, he drawled. I came to offer you a deal. Zara stepped forward cautiously, the glass partition between them. What kind of deal? Cole pressed the phone to his ear. Kendall's looking for an easy conviction. Plead guilty, do 5 years. That's better than the 10 or 15 you'll get if you fight it. Word is the prosecutor has additional evidence, some damning stuff they're ready to plan on you if you don't cooperate. Zara felt her heart rate spike, but she maintained her composure. And how do you figure this helps me? Cole shrugged. You get out sooner. 5 years is a cakewalk compared to what Kendall can dish out. Maybe you keep your head down, serve your time, and this all goes away. Zara stared at him through the glass. You and your buddies must be really confident. He leaned in, arrogance dripping from his voice. We always are. This county is ours. The old folks don't ask questions, the politicians look the other way, and the feds don't care. If you were somebody important, you'd have gotten out by now. But you're not. Zara almost laughed, but she held it in. If only he knew the truth. No thanks, she said. I'll take my chances at trial. Cole gave her a hard look before hanging up the phone and walking away. Zara watched him go, her pulse pounding. She was more determined than ever to see this through. That night, she composed a coded letter to her CIA liaison, describing what she believed to be a wide-reaching corruption scheme. She tucked the letter into an envelope and handed it off to the one trustworthy guard she'd identified, a woman named Officer Brenda Walsh, who seemed disillusioned by the system but too afraid to speak out. The next day, Zara was surprised by a face she recognized from the old days at Langley, Agent Mark Evans. He arrived in plain clothes, passing himself off as her cousin. He and Zara sat at a table in the visitation area, their conversation laced with code words to avoid detection. I hear Aunt Mildred is worried sick, Mark said, referring to the higher-ups at the agency. She wants to help, but not at the expense of causing a family rift. Translation: the CIA was willing to intervene but didn't want to blow Zara's cover on a grand scale yet. I appreciate that, Zara replied. But my new neighbors are causing quite a stir. It might be time to bring the extended family together for a little reunion. Translation: Zara wanted the CIA to gather evidence and build a case against the corrupt officials. Mark leaned forward. Aunt Mildred said to give you this. He slid a small envelope across the table. Zara understood it would contain some coded references, possibly a phone number or a means to contact a safe house. He glanced around, then added, "Be careful. We've heard these folks don't play nice." Zara nodded subtly. They'll get what's coming to them. After Mark left, Zara felt a renewed sense of purpose. She tucked the envelope inside her jumpsuit, planning to read it at the next opportunity. Despite the grim surroundings and the uncertainty of her situation, her training as a CIA agent gave her an edge. These corrupt cops and judge might run the local show, but they hadn't reckoned with the long arm of federal oversight, especially not the CIA. Word began to spread among the inmates that Zara was planning to fight. Some told her she was crazy, that she should just take the plea and hope for an early parole. Others admired her bravery, offering quiet encouragement. Zara absorbed it all calmly, biding her time. She was determined to expose this rot at its core. She could sense the tide beginning to shift, even if only slightly. The mere fact that Cole had offered a deal suggested the corrupt network saw her as a threat. They wanted to neutralize her quickly. Too bad for them. Zara Mae Collins was anything but an easy target. The following week, Zara was called into court for a pre-trial hearing. She was led through the courthouse in handcuffs, passing by dingy hallways that reeked of stale coffee and desperation. Sofia Vargas met her outside the courtroom, looking slightly more optimistic than before. "I filed a motion to dismiss based on insufficient evidence," Sofia said quietly as they entered the courtroom. "I don't expect it to succeed, but at least it might reveal the prosecution's hand." Zara nodded, scanning the room for the presence of any local journalists or curious bystanders who might be taking notes. She spotted none, further proof that this courthouse operated under a veil of secrecy, free from media scrutiny. When the hearing began, Prosecutor Arthur Nash recited the facts as if reading from a script. He claimed that an informant had tipped off the police about Zara transporting drugs, and that gave Officer Cole probable cause to search her car. Zara noticed how meticulously the prosecution fabricated evidence to bolster their case. Whoever was behind this was more organized than she initially thought. Sofia cross-examined the officers, but they stuck to their false testimonies. Judge Kendall listened with a bored expression. Finally, after all arguments were heard, he predictably denied the motion to dismiss. Zara watched as a faint smirk tugged at the corner of Kendall's mouth. He enjoyed this charade. As the bailiff escorted Zara out, she caught a glimpse of the small figure of an older woman in the gallery. The woman was clearly distressed, wringing her hands as she whispered to a nearby man. Zara realized that multiple cases were being processed that morning. Perhaps the woman was a relative of another defendant. Zara couldn't help but wonder how many families Judge Kendall had torn apart for profit or personal gain. Back at the detention center, Zara pored over the contents of the envelope Agent Mark Evans had slipped her. It included a series of numbers, coordinates perhaps, and a phone number with a note instructing her to memorize it and destroy the paper. She quickly committed the information to memory. The final line read, "Approval given for limited exposure. Proceed with caution." Zara interpreted this to mean that if it became absolutely necessary, she could reveal her CIA status. The agency would back her up. However, they wanted her to gather as much evidence as possible before making a move. The CIA was fully aware that local corruption could be a gateway to larger criminal networks. Sometimes these small-town judges and cops had ties to organized crime or even terrorist funding. If Zara could expose a broader conspiracy, all the better. Later that evening, Officer Brenda Walsh discreetly slipped Zara a prepaid phone no bigger than a credit card, wrapped in a cleaning rag. The phone was untraceable, courtesy of Zara's contacts. She mouthed the words, "Be careful," before quickly walking away. Zara hid the phone under her mattress, grateful for the small window of opportunity this device offered. Zara bided her time until lights out, then quietly activated the phone. She dialed the special number from the note, a line that connected her directly to a CIA secure server. When someone picked up, she spoke in code. "This is Traveler 426 checking in," she whispered. "The situation is compromised. Request immediate support." Also requesting deeper intel on local assets. Code name Gavel. There was a pause, then a voice responded, "Stand by, Traveler 426. Support inbound." Data requested will be delivered within 48 hours. Zara ended the call, heart pounding. The wheels were in motion. She just had to stay alive and keep her composure until the CIA could move. Meanwhile, in a dark corner office of the courthouse, Judge Kendall sat at his large mahogany desk, counting stacks of bills delivered to him by a local businessman rumored to be involved in drug trafficking. The arrangement was simple. Kendall ensured drug charges stuck, and those convicted ended up in facilities owned by Kendall's associates. Money circulated back in the form of kickbacks and campaign contributions. The local police, especially Officer Cole and his crew, played their part by ensuring a steady flow of arrests. Kendall glanced at the docket for the following week, noticing Zara Collins' trial date. He frowned. Something about her case felt riskier than the usual low-level arrests. She was too poised, too unshaken. He pressed a button on his phone. Moments later, Prosecutor Arthur Nash stepped into the office. "How's Collins?" Kendall asked. Nash shrugged. "She's got a public defender who's surprisingly persistent. Still, we've got more than enough fake evidence to lock her away. Unless..." Kendall's stare hardened. "Unless what?" Nash cleared his throat. "She has connections. She's not talking much, and that concerns me. Most defendants at this point would be begging for a plea deal." Kendall tapped his fingers on the desk. "Make sure Cole and his team keep an eye on her. I don't want any surprises." Nash nodded and left, leaving Kendall to brood in silence. An uneasy feeling gnawed at him, rare for a man accustomed to absolute control. Over at the county jail, Zara received a sealed folder discreetly slid under her cell door by Officer Walsh. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a small CIA insignia at the corner, barely visible except to those who knew what to look for. The sheet listed a series of names: Judge Horace Kendall, Prosecutor Arthur Nash, Officer Samuel Cole, and a few others Zara recognized from the station. Next to each name were cryptic notes about suspicious financial transactions and possible connections to organized crime. It also detailed an ongoing Department of Justice inquiry into allegations of racketeering within the local government, though it appeared that inquiry had stalled for lack of concrete evidence. Zara's eyes narrowed as she read the final line. "Prepare to present intel in open court if strategic advantage can be secured." So, the agency wanted her to blow the lid off this operation in the most public way possible during her trial. That carried a great deal of risk. Exposing her CIA status in a local courtroom could cause a media firestorm. Yet, if done right, it would bring immediate federal scrutiny to Kendall, Nash, and the corrupt cops. Zara understood that this might be the only way to finally end their reign. The next day, Zara waited for the perfect opportunity to test how deeply the corruption extended. She requested a meeting with the warden, claiming she had information that could reduce her sentence. She was escorted to the warden's office, a cramped space decorated with cheap motivational posters. The warden was a stout man named Peter Stevens, his mustache stained yellow from coffee. "What's this about?" Warden Stevens asked. Zara gave a practiced smile. "I have information about a large drug operation in this county. Judge Kendall's name has come up more than once. I'm willing to share details in exchange for certain considerations in my case." Stevens leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "You're accusing Judge Kendall of being involved in drugs." Zara feigned ignorance. "I'm just telling you what I heard. You can do what you want with the information." Stevens scoffed. "A person in your position should be careful about slander. Kendall is a pillar of this community." Zara continued. "He might be a pillar, but pillars can crack. All I need is a chance to talk to some investigators, federal investigators perhaps, and I can lay out the names." Stevens leaned back in his chair, wearing a smug grin. "You think you can blackmail your way out of felony charges? Let me give you a piece of advice. Keep your mouth shut. This place has a way of making troublemakers very uncomfortable." Zara recognized the threat. She shrugged nonchalantly, as if uninterested. "Your call." She left the office, having confirmed her suspicion. The corruption ran through every level of local authority, including the warden. Now Zara was certain that the only way out was through a public, high-stakes showdown. Back in her cell, Zara sensed something had shifted. That night, she was awoken by the clank of keys and the squeak of the heavy metal door. Officer Cole and two other guards entered. One guard carried a baton, the other had a taser. Zara stood, muscles tensed. "Time to move you," Cole said, his grin malevolent in the dim light. "Why?" Zara asked calmly. "No questions," he snapped. They led her down the corridor. The overhead lights buzzed, casting harsh shadows along the cinder block walls. Zara's mind raced. Was this a sanctioned transfer or an off-the-books intimidation tactic? They stepped into an isolated area, one Zara recognized as the solitary confinement wing. The stench of mildew and human despair was overwhelming. Cole opened a cell door, directing the other two guards to shove Zara inside. She stumbled but quickly regained her footing. Before leaving, Cole spoke through the small window slot. You keep poking around, you're going to end up in a worse place than this. Understood. Zara didn't reply, staring him down until he slammed the slot shut. She took a slow breath, letting the darkness envelop her. This was their attempt at breaking her spirit, at silencing any inclination she had to expose them. But Zara had been through more harrowing situations: CIA black sites, infiltration missions in enemy territory. The darkness here was nothing compared to the darkness of a war-torn battlefield. She could handle it. The solitary confinement cell was small and cold, with a narrow cot and a toilet. Daylight didn't reach here, and the overhead light was kept on a dim, disorienting glow at all hours. Zara decided to use the time to mentally rehearse her strategy for the upcoming trial. She ran through CIA interrogation counter techniques, breathing exercises, and memory recall drills to keep her mind sharp. She had come too far to crumble under the petty tyranny of small-town tyrants. Meanwhile, outside her cell, the jail staff whispered among themselves about Collins's mysterious confidence, fueling rumors that maybe she was more than just an unlucky traveler. Officers Cole and Moreno, however, continued to brag that they had a handle on her. After all, how dangerous could one woman be if she was locked away? They had no idea that Zara May Collins was about to unleash a storm, one that would shake their entire corrupt empire to its foundation. Days bled into nights in the cramped solitude of Zara's cell. She counted the hours by the shifts in the faint humming of the ventilation system. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she was pulled out of solitary confinement and escorted back to the main holding area. Her court date was approaching, and even Judge Kendall had to maintain the appearance of due process. Sofia Vargas paid her a hurried visit. "They've set the trial for next week," she said, pushing her glasses up her nose in a nervous gesture. "The prosecution is confident. They claim to have an anonymous tipster willing to testify that you were running drugs." Zara smirked. "Let them have their show. We'll be ready." Sofia looked at Zara like she was crazy. "Ready with what? We barely have any evidence." "It's your word against the entire county law enforcement structure." Zara placed a hand on Sofia's shoulder. "Trust me, there's more to this than you know. Just do your part." Sofia sighed heavily but nodded. Zara could tell the public defender was torn between skepticism and a glimmer of hope. If Zara was somehow telling the truth, it might be the biggest case of Sofia's career. Once Sofia left, Zara was approached by Officer Brenda Walsh in a deserted corridor, out of sight from the other guards. Walsh handed Zara a small slip of paper, careful to keep her voice low. "Your new cell is D14. Check under the bed frame." "That's all I can say." Zara slipped the note into her jumpsuit and thanked Walsh with a curt nod, aware that any sign of warmth or camaraderie might tip off the other guards. Later, she was indeed moved to cell D14. As she slipped onto the narrow mattress, she felt her fingers brushing against a small rectangular object taped beneath the metal frame. She waited until lights out, then carefully peeled it free, a tiny flash drive. Zara's heart pounded. What did it contain? How would she access it? She needed a computer. Fortunately, the jail's law library had a single outdated PC, which inmates could use under supervision. She'd have to be cunning. The next day, Zara requested access to the law library under the pretense of wanting to review case law for her upcoming trial. A stern-faced guard escorted her, standing watch near the door. Zara inserted the flash drive into the computer, opening a single folder labeled Second Wind. Inside were documents, photos, and short videos. Some were financial records showing large sums of money transferred into accounts linked to Judge Kendall and Prosecutor Nash. Others were phone recordings of Kendall openly discussing sentencing lengths with prison officials in exchange for kickbacks. One video, timestamped just a week earlier, showed a hidden camera view of Officer Cole meeting with a known drug trafficker. Their conversation revolved around Zara May Collins, her arrest, the planted drugs, and the need to keep her in line. Zara nearly gasped. This was a smoking gun, more than enough to implicate the entire ring. She quickly memorized the contents, knowing she couldn't leave the flash drive in the computer too long or risk detection. Logging out, Zara casually removed the drive and slipped it back into her jumpsuit. She could feel the guard's suspicious gaze, but he said nothing as he led her back to her cell. That evening, Zara composed a coded letter to her CIA contact, referencing the crucial details she discovered. The trial date arrived faster than Zara expected. She was awakened at dawn, handed a set of street clothes, cheap black slacks, and a white blouse, and told to get dressed. Sophia arrived shortly after to escort her to the courthouse. They were led through a side entrance, avoiding the main crowd. Even so, Zara could see a few local onlookers milling about, curious to witness the drug trafficker trial. Inside the courtroom, Judge Kendall presided like a grim monarch. The jurors filed in, most of them middle-aged, predominantly white folks who eyed Zara with a mixture of suspicion and pity. Prosecutor Nash wasted no time in painting Zara as a cunning trafficker who used her respectable demeanor as a cover. He presented the bag of cocaine as evidence, along with the testimony of Officer Cole, who repeated his fabricated story about receiving an anonymous tip. Sophia tried to object, pointing out the lack of corroboration, but Judge Kendall overruled her at every turn. The tone in the courtroom was heavily skewed toward the prosecution. The final nail seemed to come when a so-called anonymous tipster, whose face was hidden behind a screen at the judge's direction, claimed that Zara had been seen making multiple drug deals. By the time the prosecution rested, Sophia looked nearly defeated. She whispered to Zara, "They've stacked the deck so thoroughly. I don't see a way out of this." Zara placed a reassuring hand on Sophia's forearm. "Just wait. I'll be taking the stand." Sophia's eyes widened. "That's risky. They'll eat you alive on cross-examination." Zara gave a small, confident smile. "Trust me." When it was Zara's turn, she rose and took the stand. She locked eyes with the jurors, her presence emanating a calm authority she had cultivated through years of CIA fieldwork. "Ms. Collins," Sophia began, "could you tell the court in your own words why you believe these charges are false?" Zara took a breath, her voice steady. "I'm not just a random defendant. I work for the Central Intelligence Agency." A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. Judge Kendall's gavel thundered. "Order. Order in the court." The jurors exchanged looks of shock and disbelief. Prosecutor Nash stood abruptly, face reddening. "Objection. This is irrelevant and an obvious ploy for sympathy." Zara turned her gaze to the judge. "With all due respect, Your Honor, my occupation is central to my defense. The CIA can verify my identity. I have documentation." Kendall looked like he'd swallowed a hornet's nest. For a moment, he stammered, unable to hide his fear and anger. This is highly irregular, Ms. Collins. If you're lying about this, you'll be held in contempt." Zara nodded calmly. "Understood. But I'm not lying." Sophia handed over a packet of documents to the clerk, which Zara had managed to receive through her CIA contact. The clerk glanced at them, then hesitantly approached the bench. Kendall skimmed the top pages, and if Zara wasn't mistaken, she saw genuine panic in his eyes. "Members of the jury," Zara continued, "I was on personal leave, traveling through this county. I was pulled over and arrested on false charges. I've since discovered evidence that points to widespread corruption within this courthouse, law enforcement, and possibly beyond. I request that these documents be admitted into evidence." Nash tried to object again, but the murmuring in the courtroom was reaching a fever pitch. Some of the jurors leaned forward, curiosity overshadowing doubt. With no graceful way out, Judge Kendall glared at Zara. "Fine, we'll admit them for now. But I warn you, Ms. Collins, if this is some elaborate stunt." Zara cut him off, her tone razor sharp. "It's not a stunt, Your Honor. In fact, I have a flash drive containing audio and video proof of Officer Cole's planting drugs in my car, as well as conversations implicating members of your court." She held up the tiny device, letting the overhead lights glint off its metallic surface. The courtroom erupted in chaos. Prosecutor Nash shouted to object, but Kendall couldn't restore order quickly enough. Several people in the gallery stood, straining to see what Zara was holding. Sophia wore a look of astonishment, as though even she hadn't expected something this explosive. Judge Kendall slammed his gavel repeatedly. "Silence. Everyone will remain silent, or I'll clear the courtroom." Zara remained standing, unflinching. She had the initiative now, and she wasn't about to relinquish it. I request an immediate review of this evidence, she said. I also request that the FBI or the Department of Justice be contacted to investigate, as my agency cannot directly intervene in domestic affairs beyond providing my own documentation. Kendall's face was white with fear and rage. He glanced at the clock, then at Prosecutor Nash, who looked equally terrified. For a split second, Zara thought Kendall might order her arrest on contempt of court or some fabricated charge, but the cat was out of the bag. Any drastic move now would only confirm his guilt. Court is in recess, Kendall finally announced, his voice trembling with barely contained fury. We'll reconvene after lunch to review this so-called evidence. He banged the gavel so hard that it echoed like thunder in the tense courtroom. As people began to file out, Zara locked eyes with Kendall and saw something she had never seen before in the face of a man who claimed absolute power, real fear. The courthouse corridors bustled with frantic energy as soon as the judge called for recess. Whispered conversations crackled like static electricity in every corner. A few reporters who had shown up to cover a routine drug trial now sensed they had stumbled into the scoop of the year. Zara was escorted to a small holding room where Sofia Vargas joined her moments later. Her face was flushed with exhilaration. I had no idea you were actually CIA. Zara offered a tight-lipped smile. I needed to keep it under wraps until the right moment. Now that moment is here. Before Sofia could respond, the door creaked open. In stepped a tall, middle-aged man in a crisp suit, an FBI agent judging by his ID badge. Behind him stood another agent, a woman with a determined expression. They introduced themselves as Special Agents Pierce and Barrett. We received a call from the CIA, Pierce said, his tone curt but professional. They indicated we might find cause to investigate. We're here to collect and review the evidence you mentioned. Zara handed him the flash drive. There are also documents and testimonies. It'll all point to Judge Kendall, Officer Cole, Prosecutor Nash, and others. Pierce nodded, inserting the flash drive into a secure laptop he carried. Barrett set up a small device that looked like a portable data scanner. They began to comb through the files, occasionally exchanging glances of surprise or disgust. This is extensive, Barrett remarked. Bribery, conspiracy to commit perjury, false arrest, evidence tampering. It's a laundry list. Pierce looked up at Zara. If this checks out, and it looks like it does, you've done the FBI's job for us. We've had an open file on corruption in this county, but never had enough tangible proof to go after the big players. Sofia chimed in, her voice still quivering with disbelief. So what happens now? Pierce squared his shoulders. We'll brief our superiors. Ideally, we want to arrest the suspects simultaneously to avoid tipping anyone off. MS. Collins, we'll also need your sworn statement. Zara nodded. Of course. Across the courthouse, Judge Kendall was in his chambers, gripping the edge of his desk with shaking hands. Prosecutor Nash stood nearby, his tie loosened, sweat beading on his forehead. This is a disaster, Kendall hissed. That woman was CIA. Why didn't we see it coming? Nash ran a trembling hand through his hair. We tried to dig into her background, but everything came back sanitized. We figured she was just some nobody from DC. Kendall stared at the wall, mind racing. He considered trying to flee, but that would be too obvious. We have to do damage control. Maybe we can claim entrapment or a breach of procedure. Or we can say the evidence is fabricated. It's too late for that. Nash responded grimly. The FBI is already here. We're done. Kendall tightened his jaw, his eyes flashing with desperation. Not if we discredit her. Go out there and accuse her of forging the footage. Demand the court not admit it until we can verify its authenticity. Stall for time. Nash nodded, though he looked unconvinced. They both knew the end was near. When court reconvened, the tension was palpable. The jury shuffled in, faces etched with curiosity. Judge Kendall took the bench, looking paler than before. Prosecutor Nash stood, clearing his throat. Your Honor, the defense has submitted so-called evidence that we have not had a chance to authenticate, Nash said. We request that it be deemed inadmissible until a thorough forensic analysis can be performed. Sofia rose to respond, but Special Agent Pierce entered the courtroom, stepping up to the prosecution's table with confident authority. He addressed the judge directly. Your Honor, I'm Special Agent Pierce with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We've conducted a preliminary verification of the digital files in question. Our experts confirm there's no sign of tampering. We have reason to believe it is authentic. Kendall's face remained a rigid mask, but his eyes betrayed him. Agent Pierce, the court appreciates your input, but the chain of custody is questionable. Pierce cut him off, a rare move in a courtroom. We're prepared to secure an official chain of custody right now, Your Honor. And given the nature of these allegations, corruption within the court itself, we have grounds to request a federal injunction on these proceedings. A stunned silence fell over the courtroom. Zara watched the jurors, some looking confused, others intrigued. She could almost see the cogs in their minds turning, the realization dawning that their own judge might be a criminal. Finally, Kendall cleared his throat. The court will take a brief recess to confer with federal authorities. But Pierce wasn't done. Respectfully, Your Honor, we have federal warrants ready to serve. We request that you remain present while our team executes those warrants. A collective gasp echoed through the room. The bailiff shifted uncomfortably. Kendall's voice cracked. On whom exactly? Pierce's gaze flicked to Prosecutor Nash, and then back to the judge. We have warrants for the arrest of Prosecutor Arthur Nash and Officer Samuel Cole. There's also a sealed warrant that may be unsealed pending further evidence. Kendall's knuckles whitened around his gavel, which he held but didn't bang. It was clear to everyone in the courtroom who the sealed warrant was for. In the chaos that followed, armed FBI agents swarmed into the courthouse. Officer Cole, seated in the gallery, tried to slip away, but two agents quickly apprehended him. The jurors watched in wide-eyed astonishment as the prosecution's star witness was handcuffed and read his Miranda rights. Prosecutor Nash, pale as a sheet, stammered protests about due process while an agent calmly recited the charges against him. Judge Kendall, seeing the unstoppable wave crashing down, attempted one last stance of defiance. This is highly irregular. I won't allow federal interference in my courtroom. Agent Pierce stepped forward, voice resolute. With all due respect, Your Honor, we're acting under federal authority to investigate allegations of corruption in this county's judicial system. We have reason to believe you're involved. The hush that fell over the courtroom was profound. Kendall's eyes darted around, searching for an escape route. I had no knowledge of this, he finally sputtered. Pierce handed the sealed warrant to a nearby agent, who opened it and nodded. Pierce turned back to Kendall. Your Honor, you are under arrest for conspiracy, racketeering, bribery, and corruption. Kendall's gavel slipped from his hand, clattering onto the bench. Two FBI agents approached, and for a moment, it looked like Kendall might resist. He glowered at Zara, who met his gaze with cold resolve. You'll regret this, he hissed as the agents escorted him away. Zara watched in silence as the local tyrant was removed from his own domain. The feeling of justice, long overdue, washed over her. Sophia stood next to her, mouth agape. In the days that followed, the story became a national headline. Major networks picked up the news. Corrupt judge, cops, and prosecutor arrested. Defendant revealed as CIA agent. Zara's identity was no longer a secret, though the CIA worked quickly to manage the press, limiting any potential fallout or security risks. They released a brief statement confirming Zara May Collins was indeed an operative on personal leave and that they were cooperating with the FBI's ongoing investigation. The Department of Justice launched a full-scale probe, and more local officials fell under scrutiny. Bank records, phone logs, and witness testimonies flooded in, revealing a sprawling web of corruption that reached city council members, private prison liaisons, and even a few state-level politicians. The name Kendall became synonymous with judicial bribery, and dozens of prior convictions from his court were re-examined, leading to appeals and overturned sentences. Zara found herself at the center of a media storm. Many praised her courage. Others questioned the CIA's involvement in domestic affairs. But Zara knew her conscience was clear. She had fought to expose a grave injustice, not to forward any hidden agenda. When reporters asked her why she risked blowing her cover, she simply said, "No one is above the law, not even those who wear the robes of justice or the badges of law enforcement." Sofia Vargas's once fledgling career skyrocketed. She became a sought-after attorney, featured in prominent legal magazines for her role in uncovering systemic corruption. Despite the sudden limelight, Sofia remained humble, giving credit to Zara and the courageous whistleblowers who helped them. Officer Brenda Walsh, the guard who had quietly aided Zara, also stepped forward to testify. Her conscience couldn't bear witnessing the corruption any longer. She resigned from the department and offered crucial insights into the bribery and intimidation tactics used to maintain silence within the jail. As for Zara, the CIA granted her a brief leave of absence to recover from the ordeal and handle the fallout of her public unmasking. She returned to Washington, D.C., where she found a small measure of peace in knowing she had struck a significant blow against a corrupt institution. Agents Mark Evans and the others who assisted her discreetly congratulated her, but they also urged her to lie low. Zara understood the importance of caution. There were likely still enemies out there, people who had lost money or influence because of her actions. Yet Zara felt a renewed sense of purpose. No longer did she see her job merely as a faceless entity within a sprawling intelligence bureaucracy. Now she understood the true meaning of protecting American values. Sometimes the threat to justice came not from foreign soil, but from within. In the aftermath, Zara kept in touch with Sophia. They formed a bond forged in adversity, sharing notes on legal strategy and updates on the ongoing investigations. Through her CIA contacts, Zara even helped direct some federal oversight resources to ensure the newly appointed judges and prosecutors were free from the corruption that had plagued the county. Justice, for once, had the final word. And there you have it, the gripping, true-to-life tale of a small-town conspiracy so confident in its power that it never saw Zara May Collins coming. A brilliant CIA agent on a simple vacation, caught in a web of lies and deceit that stretched all the way to the highest seat in the local courtroom. With courage, resourcefulness, and the backing of the very agency no one suspected, Zara shattered their toxic empire, proving that justice can prevail even when it hides in the shadows. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, share with friends who love a good showdown against corruption, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel for more dramatic stories that reveal the hidden battles of everyday heroes. By sharing, you help us continue telling tales that inspire and remind us all the truth can't be silenced.